Hello and welcome to a look at Powerdrift for the Commodore 64 and for the Amiga, a Sega arcade original released by Activision for both systems. I need to preface this by saying that the arcade original was a racing game with three unique features, at least at the time. First and foremost, it was extremely fast-paced. Secondly, the track design was of a type that resembled roller coasters more than normal tracks. If you are the type who are sensitive to roller coasters and they can make you nauseous, trust me, playing this game in the arcade could do exactly the same. It did to me. I'm a chicken, I know, but so be it. And the third thing that made this game somewhat special was when your selected driver overtook an opponent, they would make a rude gesture. How very mature. The thing is though, and this is a very important caveat, is the fact that an awful lot of Sega's arcade games were loaded up with gimmicks. Outrun, cabinet, super hang-on, motorcycle handlebar, afterburner, a complete cabinet that moved around and shook around as you were doing barrel rolls and all sorts of things. Absolutely amazing experiences. But that was the thing, they were experiences. You paid good money for the experience, but for those arcade games that was of the highest quality, you know what, you never thought that you threw money away. You had an experience. Trying to convert that kind of experience to home computer systems without access to a moving cabinet, analog control, pedals, all sorts of things, would always end up in a bit of a half-hearted, semi-bland experience. For what it is, the Commodore 64 version of Powerdrift is not bad. The graphics, in my opinion, and that is my opinion, goes between being decent and ugly as sin. I find it very interesting that when you go uphill long enough, any side scenery just disappears and it looks like the road leads straight into the sky. You'll see an example of that coming up shortly. All right here. But outside of that, I mean, the game flows fine. It plays better than Commodore 64 version of Outrun. Not saying an awful lot, I suppose, but I mean, it deserves to be mentioned. It is supposed to be a fast-paced racing game, and there's not an awful lot of sense of speed necessarily in this version. It feels more like a Sunday drive, but from a gameplay perspective, it's not bad. There's not an awful lot of sound, and the most dominant sound is the soundtrack made by Dave Lowe. And while I have to admit I find it to be a decent soundtrack, I also found it to be somewhat repetitive after a while, because it just keeps looping. One thing though, a bit of an oddity. We'll be finishing off this track, and then I'll skip one track and move on to track number 4, which was the last track that I raised on this recording. According to my own observations, the curves or bends or whatever you decide to call them are no tighter on this track than they were on the earlier tracks, and yet on this track the car seems to be much more willing to slide out. That was a jump, by the way, in case you're wondering. And I suppose in order to give some sort of sense of value for money, there has to be some sort of inflated difficulty level. There's no road color difference, so we don't know, are we driving on pure ice or whatever? I don't know. But anyway, of course a game doesn't take 60 hours to complete because of raw gameplay. It has to be made somewhat difficult in order to allow you to fight it for a bit longer so you get some sort of sense of value for money. This game is not unbeatable, it's not super difficult. If you take time, you can probably quite easily beat it. And that mechanic, by the way, of spinning out when you hit something gets a bit annoying, especially if you get hit multiple times in a row, which can happen. You can spend 15-20 seconds spinning out like that. And of course, because you're not racing against the timer, but are racing for positions, you have to qualify first, second, or third in order to continue. Spinning out is going to make it hard to catch up. Overall though, this game, I didn't hate playing it, but I didn't necessarily love playing it either. It was okay. I'm a bit harsh towards this high score name entry. A name I've used before and bound to be using again. But not too bad. That is reserved for what comes next. Oh well, the Amiga version, I'm letting the full drawn images intro play, which was also present on the Commodore 64 version, but I didn't want to use both. There's no reason to. Hi, my name's Jason and I'm rude, haha. Almost as rude as whoever decided that this game was okay to release. Looking at the names, Uncle Art, by the way, is Dave Lowe's artist name. It looks to be made by roughly the same team that made Super Hang-On. Super Hang-On is not a bad game. I think it's extremely overrated on the Amiga, but it's definitely not a bad game. Oh, just like the Commodore 64 version, you start by selecting a track and then you select the driver. You can see the driver select moving across, and then you press fire and hope that it selects the correct driver. Welcome to Powerdrift for the Amiga. Remember, this game was made for an Amiga 500, and that is what it is currently running on. Or as the case is, more likely to be not running on. The graphics are more arcade accurate, but it doesn't mean a bloody thing when the rest of the game is a pile of crap. All those fancy final end kind of thing. Graphics and sound will never, ever make up for gameplay. I should say, by the way, the controls are done with either joystick or mouse or keyboard, and it depresses me to say, but this game also plays better using the mouse than any other control type, and it's not playing very well using the mouse, especially not moving the way it is right now. Losing patience, I decided to throw something a bit more powerful at it, just to see if it made a difference, and lo and behold, it did. Surprise, surprise.
3, 2, 1, go!
Still playing with mouse, because it is the better control system. I should mention that the game is currently being powered by 50 MHz. Let me put in perspective that the average age of the Commodore gamer, whether it was Commodore 64 or Amiga, was between 12 and 17. There was no chance they could afford the hardware required in order to power up the Amiga to that kind of speed. I virtually always souped up my Amigas, but I was quite an enthusiast, and I had a decent job and I didn't have many expenses, so I could afford to do it. And I chose to do it. Not for a game like this crap, but I mean, in general, just that's the kind of Amiga user I was. I wouldn't be arrogant enough to say a super user or power user, but I like to have a souped up system. But you know what, when you have a game that's released that your average player base can't possibly run at a decent frame rate because they wouldn't be able to afford it. Despite the fact that this was released for the Amiga 500, a bog standard Amiga 500, and as you saw before how absolutely amazingly it ran on that system, you have an issue. And as I was saying before, sound and graphics cannot make up for lacking gameplay, but when you also have issues in those departments, then you are in trouble. The sound as such is fine, the soundtrack is okay, nothing spectacular, definitely not Daedalus finest hour, but it's acceptable. The graphics though, it looks like someone took a pile of gravel and a bunch of random colors and put in a blender and threw across the screen. You have no sense of where the track is. You're just, when you get to a bend, you just whack the mouse left or right, whatever is appropriate, and pray that you stay on track. And 9 out of 10 times you won't, because you will probably hear every single time you flip, which is frankly done very, very quickly. It's because we're off track. I am not a coder, I could not have done this better. So technically I should probably just shut up. But you know what? I don't have to be a good chef in order to be a food critic. Someone greenlit this game for release. Someone was saying, yep, this game is fine as it is, it runs perfectly fine, it's virtually identical to the arcade. Put it on floppy disk and pray that someone is not reading reviews and not trying to stay informed and is foolish enough to actually spend money on this. Getting this game for free would be an insult. And of course back then, I mean, you didn't like a game that was tough. Does it work? Yeah, fine. Can't help you. You're not getting a replacement. Well, it doesn't work. Here's a new copy of your crappy game. Have fun. I've decided not to use foul language on my videos because it doesn't add anything. This game tempted me to load up the entire arsenal of foul language. On that cheerful note, thanks for watching. Take care and see you next time. Bye bye for now.